Good afternoon. A warm welcome to all the delegates and the participants for this keynote address session on National Education Policy 2020 and its impact on higher education scenario in India in 21st century. To start with, my humble pranams and salutations to His Holiness Sri Hari Prasad Swamiji and His Holiness Sri Tyagolab Swamiji and all the staff members and delegates of Atmiya University Rajkot and staff members and students and office bearers of Sri M.N. Virani Science College Autonomous at Rajkot. Greetings to all the delegates who have joined this particular keynote address. To start with, I am thankful to all the organizers for having given me this opportunity to address all the staff members on this important solemn occasion of Teachers' Day. Friends, as you are aware, we are celebrating Teachers' Day on 5th of September 2020 every year. This is a date to give our salutations, tributes, and regards to all the teachers who have taught us and brought us up to this level. Long live the teaching fraternity. With these few words, let me just say a few words about the importance of education. As you are aware, friends, education is harbinger of socio-economic change. It is the cornerstone of any edifice that brings about the socio-economic development of a country. Particularly in a developing and developed country, education plays a very, very important role. India and America and various other Western countries are the best example for the importance of education and their transformation as a developed country. Realizing the importance of this, the moment India got independence, our founder fathers gave a lot of emphasis to higher education and also primary education. As you know, I don't want to go into the details of the statistical data. All of you are aware. India was very, very poor in terms of its literacy rate and also its gross enrollmental ratio for primary education as well as to higher education. So the first responsibility of the founder fathers of our institution of India is to introduce education in a very, very higher perspective to realize the goal of giving education to one and all. Before this, let me spend 2 minutes on the importance of education and its development in a pre-independent scenario. Not that India was a poor country. India was considered as one of the richest countries as far as the knowledge, values and tradition is concerned. India has got one of the richest heritages of culture and heritage of more than 5,000 years. Hence, it is second to none as far as the importance of education is concerned. But in India, education was considered as a priority sector where only those who are interested in pursuing education, they used to go in search of gurus and they used to learn that education in Gurukula system. They were trying to learn both the scholastic education in terms of knowledge, logic, Rajniti, as well as human values and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they were trying to find out what best skills they can acquire in terms of the warfare as well as running the country or running the society. Hence, Gurukula system was considered as one of the best important novelty of the Indian tradition as far as the education is concerned. Realizing the importance of it, we also had very good institutions, best considered as best in the world, like Nalanda, Takshashila, and so on and so forth, where thousands of students from across the globe used to come in search of the latest knowledge, be it in philosophy, in mathematics, in science, technology, as well as humanities, and also spiritualism and whatnot. And hence, India was considered as one of the richest hubs of the education. If this is the scenario of scholastic education and perfect value-based education, other people who wanted to learn something, they were following what is known as vocational education. where they used to become apprentice based on their choice with the experts, be it carpentry, smithy, pottery, smithy, or whatever it may be. So they used to join that particular school, or is it music or anything for that matter. They used to join that particular school and a school or say group, and under the patronage of the leader who is considered as the guru, they used to practice. And over the years, they used to master that particular technology and master that particular skill and develops competency. And after achieving the perfection, they used to move towards their own native places to ultimately implement whatever they have learned. All the temples in India today, all the monuments that are there in Indian scenario today, on Indian soil today, as historical monuments, they are all examples as to how our vocational education has transformed India and Indian scenario. So every village, for that matter, was a center of vocational education, and at a small level. And there were perfect centers or centers of perfection at various places. So people used to either go in search of the Gurukula system for knowledge and scholastic knowledge, scholastic learning, or to learn the vocationalization in terms of vocational education through a well-known guru system or Gurukula system or apprentice system. This is how the scenario was there in India before independence. But 150 years before independence, in India, the concept of practicing Western education came into existence. The leading role was played by Raja Ram Mohan Rai. Raja Ram Mohan Rai said that there is a need to imbibe the Western concept of education also to bring a holistic education, not just traditional education. So he went for universalization of education by inviting Western type of education to Indian scenario. That's how the schools and colleges started in terms of the British model in the British India, and then also before independence, this was the practice. That's how we had schools and colleges based on the Western model, and we were teaching both in vernacular language as well as in the foreign language, namely English. And importance was given mainly to the knowledge component of literature and social sciences, and very less importance or least importance was given to skill-based education or vocational education or professional education. This is how the scenario went on changing in the Indian perspective. And once we got independence, before that, let me just tell you that before independence, whomsoever wanted to pursue higher education, to take our own founder fathers of our Indian independence, all of them wanted to study law, because law was considered as one of the important basics for administration. That's why they used to go abroad to study bar at law, namely the legal education, and started practicing both in British court as well as in Indian courts. Our own Mahatma Gandhiji also, he studied bar at law and then went to South Africa to practice law. Similarly, you have got list of illustrious personalities used to go abroad and study. Majority of them studied legal education. Some of them pursued science and technology, and some of them pursued social sciences and humanities and so on and so forth. And a lot of emphasis was given to those who used to go abroad. Even Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he also went abroad, thanks to a number of philanthropists who supported him. And he went abroad, he studied economics, he studied political science, he studied law, and ultimately he became a master, a champion of these three subjects, so that he could become the chairman of the drafting committee of our Indian Constitution. Thus, we can see a scenario where education is given primary importance in the Indian scenario. Naturally, when once we got independence, emphasis was given to higher education and also primary education. To that, a number of commissions were constituted. The important commission to start with was of Sri Radhakrishnan Commission in 1948-49, where they gave a blueprint for the development of the structure and function of higher education in India. Then the second important feature was the Kothari Commission, where they gave importance to the structural reforms of higher education and primary education in terms of 10 plus 2 plus 3 type of education. That is 10 years of primary and secondary, 2 years of intermediate studies, and 3 years of 4 years of degree, as the case may be. And then in 1986, we had a national education policy in 1986, and during that time, one important dimension was added. Before that, let us understand what are the four important dimensions that was addressed to by the higher education system. The first dimension was that our founder fathers as well as educationists wanted to give importance to access. That is, everyone, every Indian citizen who is interested in learning must have access to higher education portals, namely education portal in general, higher education in particular. That's why they started establishing colleges, universities, schools, even at peripheral places, so that people need not go in search of the institution, but they can have education at the doorsteps. But when compared to the population of India and also the number of colleges and schools we started, they were only minuscule. But that's what independent India, nascent independent India, to start with, could do. So that's how the initiation took place, the transformation took place, and then development started taking place. Access was given importance to. The second important component was equity. As you know, our Indian society was having a lot of stratification, the class system or the caste system, as the case may be. Hence, the founder fathers of our constitution thought it fit enough to say that everyone should have an equal opportunity, irrespective of the caste, creed, gender, race, or religion, or whatever may be the case. So, equity was given importance to. So, access and equity, these were the two important cardinal principles based on which Indian education developed. The third important component was relevance. During that time, India wanted people with literacy, people who could manage government, people who could manage the developmental activities, both in field as well as off the field, and also in the office, and also to don all the developmental activities of the industries that were coming up. Hence, the importance was given to the curriculum in the form of relevance of the curriculum to the needs of the society. So the third dimension was the relevance. The fourth dimension was social justice. The social justice concept is embedded in our constitution itself, that is affirmative discrimination. Since in our society there is a lot of disparity amongst various sects of people because of the ancient development of the society with discrimination, our founder fathers wanted to give equal importance to what is known as positive social discrimination. Hence, social justice was introduced as the four cardinal principles. So these were the four cardinal principles and pillars on which the edifice of higher education and primary education were developed in India: access, equity, social justice, and relevance. Then in 1986, by the time India was almost opening up to the global scenario, number of Indian stalwarts are going abroad to study in all the walks of education. So education was assuming a lot of importance from the point of development, not only of the society, of the family, individual, and also of the nation. Hence, to compete at global level, the National Education Policy in 1986 introduced a fifth dimension, namely quality. They said whatever we do must have the quality concerns and quality initiatives and quality enhancement and enrichment aspects, and it should be compared to the global standards. Earlier, it was only the minimum standards that were prescribed, but they said sky should be the limit, where we should always compare ourselves with the best of the institutions abroad, which are providing the best education as in today. And hence they thought that the only way to achieve this is to go for standards. Accordingly, number of transformation took place in the form of assessment and accreditation of the institutions, and also quality benchmarks, goal setting, and so on and so forth. Then after 34 years, when the world was witnessing a lot of changes, we moved from the second millennium to third millennium, we moved from 20th century to 21st century. Friends, it will not be out of context if I take 2 minutes of your time just to say what is the importance of 21st century. The world has witnessed number of revolutions, not from the point of political science or social sciences, but from the point of entire society. We saw the agricultural wave through which the entire world economy was based on agriculture, cottage industries, and rural industries. Later on, the industrialization came. So we call it as Industrial Revolution 1, where the importance of mechanization was understood. Earlier, everything was done through only the human hands, and it was taking more time. So importance of industrialization was to bring mechanized process, so that the human energy is preserved for finer things, and the lot of other strenuous work is done by the missions. So mechanization took place. So Industrial Revolution 1 was the outcome of technology and science in 15th and 16th century, and thus Industrial Revolution 1 took place. Then after a few years, then the second concept of Industrial Revolution was introduction of the power or energy component into the mechanization. Earlier mechanizations were done by the human energy, whereas in the Industrial Revolution 4, Industrial Revolution 2, the human energy was replaced by the chemical or mechanical or physical energy in the form of electricity or steam energy or petroleum energy, whatever may be the case. So thus electricity, steam power and various other factors ultimately brought about the mechanization, and it's running through the electricity and assembly line. These were the two important components. This is known as Industrial Revolution 2. So these two revolutions revolutionized the world till 1970s. In 1970s, one important dimension took place. The dimension was the introduction of computer system or computerization and the development of ICT, namely information communication technology, through the importance and development of the communication technology and digitalization, computerization. Thus, Industrial Revolution brought about the importance of digitalization of whatever we have done in Industrial Revolution 1 and 2. That's how we could see from 1970s and 80s till the end of 20th century, a lot of transformation of the world took place mainly because of digitalization. It looked as if the entire world is becoming one village. The concept of global village, connectivity at global level became important. So digitalization had such an important power. But this lasted only for about 30 years, 30 to 40 years. Then came Industrial Revolution 4. Industrial Revolution 4 is known for one important concept. That concept is called disruption of the existing technologies and science and emergence of new form of science and technology. Whatever was there was totally disrupted, and ultimately new form of the science and technology emerged. I'll give you only one or two examples. Earlier, telephone was separate, the camera was separate, photography camera was separate, and the recording was separate, and videographing was separate, and so on, and even computer was separate. But by 2010, you could see a technology where all of them were put into one. Thus, all other old instruments started disappearing. Today, you can't see a camera with films. You can't see camera separately, mobile, our computer separately, our mobile telephone separately, recorder separately, and whatnot. I'm just giving only one example. Likewise, I can give hundreds of examples to say what is known as disruptive technology. And this disruptive technology introduced the fourth industrial revolution by 2010 and started developing on its own. Thus, there is a need for India to have a new national education policy which can address to the needs of 21st century, to take India as #1 developed country in the world. That is the reason why the present leaders thought it fit enough to have a national education policy which can address all the needs of higher education for benefiting for 21st century, which can address the needs of the Industrial Revolution 4. Hence, in 2019, a committee headed by Dr. Kasturi Rangan, a famous astrophysicist and ISRO chairman, under the chairman of him, a committee was set up, and they studied the entire Indian scenario as well as the Western scenario and the global scenario, and they submitted a report. That report was submitted to Government of India, and Government of India has accepted it, and they have notified it as a National Education Policy 2020. Now everyone is interested as to what is this education policy, what are its impacts, and in what way it can revolutionize our society, and in what way we have to adjust ourselves or transform ourselves to achieve the goals enshrined in these national education policies and perspectives. Hence, I'm taking this opportunity to take you for next about 30 to 45 minutes on the important recommendations of this national education policy and its impact on our present Indian education system, and what is that we are expected as the ambassadors of education in India to take India forward. So with the permission of the Swamiji and all the other delegates, I would like to share my PowerPoint presentation to you for the next 30 minutes to give the highlights of the national education policy. Friends, this national education policy accepted by Government of India and notified by Government of India gives emphasis to overall education, both primary as well as secondary. Since I belong to higher education sector and professional education sector, I would like to confine my presentation today and discussion today on the higher education and professional education. I belong to an university, Pravara Institute of Medical Sciences, which is deemed to be university. Ours is basically health science institution having medical, dental, nursing, physiotherapy, and social medicine and biotechnology, medical biotechnology. And we are in a rural area. So I bring our season's greetings and best wishes to all the delegates who have joined this particular webinar to listen to this keynote address. And I also bring warm wishes and greetings on behalf of Atmiya University and M.N. Virani Science College, which is an autonomous institution. And Atmiya group of institutions at Yogidham Gurukul is known for giving quality education and value-based education. And the Swamiji's wish is to give importance to value-based education because we want to develop a human society. In that endeavor, they are trying to merge the knowledge, skills, along with the values which are necessary for the human development for a holistic society. Thus, I also remember my days where I spent a good number of days and years at Atmiya Group of Institutions as the director of the campus and also as advisor. And even today, I continue to be advisor to this particular group of institutions. I seek the benign blessings of Hariprasad Swamiji and Tyagula Swamiji in this context. I already told you that we have got number of commissions. University Education Commission of Radhakrishnan in 1948. Then importance was given to Kothari Commission in 1964 and 66, 10 plus 2 plus 3 system. The National Policy in Education, NP in 1986, where quality was introduced. And now we are into the last one, namely the Kasturi Rangan's committee report submitted on 31st May 2019 for the public domain. And after all the public feedback, the Government of India has announced it as National Education Policy 2020. And thus we have got policy, we have to change the regulation, and the regulation will change the systems and processes, and definitely we are going to have very good outcome in this particular process. Friends, what are the changes that this particular national education policy brings? So I would like to say, in what way this particular education policy transforms higher education in India. And this transformation is mainly aimed at 21st century, as I told you, Industrial Revolution 4, and also sustainable development goal of UN and UNESCO. The goal is called goal number 4. So it is called SDG 4. So this national education policy is aiming at transforming higher education in India to achieve the expectations of 21st century and Industrial Revolution 4 and Sustainable Development Goal number 4. The first recommendation was renaming of MHRD as Minister of Education. It has already been implemented. Then all these days we gave importance to education as a monofaculty or multi-faculty or whatnot. But today this report emphasizes that the entire education system must be holistic. It should be having global education concept and it should be multidisciplinary in approach. with this multidisciplinary approach is a very, very important component. Not that we are not giving importance to multidisciplinary approach. The way we looked at multidisciplinary approach all these days is different, but the way we are looking at multidisciplinary approach today is different. You will understand this when we move further and further. Uh, Again, I told you, access, equity, social justice, relevance were the highlights in the beginning. They continue to be highlights today also, whereas quality was added in 1986 and it continues to be a defining element of higher education. But to that, two more dimensions have been added by this national education policy. That is to to give importance to creativity and innovation. Not that earlier we were not giving importance to, but today we expect that as an output and an outcome, namely creativity and innovation, and institutional autonomy at all levels. I will explain that later. Then participation of government, private, public-private partnership, as well as foreign universities. Foreign universities component is also very important. I will discuss that later. Then enhancement of expenditure on higher education and education from 4% to 6% of GDP. In other words, they want to enhance it by 50% of what we are spending today. Then gross enrollment ratio. At present, gross enrollment ratio of India for higher education is 26.4%. Earlier it was only 10%, became 12%, then 18%. Today, thanks to the visionary leaders and the implementation of the policies, we have got around 25-26% of gross enrollment ratio. But still, the dropout rate is very, very high. So, by cutting short the gross dropout rate, the visionary leaders expect the gross enrollment ratio by 2035 to be 50%. In other words, doubling the existing gross enrollment ratio, which indicates that you should double the number of institutions and the universities. The entire national education policy perspective is aiming at restructuring of higher education with a paradigm shift, internationalization of higher education with a paradigm shift, thrust to research with a paradigm shift, functional transformation of higher education with emphasis on technology, then separation of powers and functions. So these are the basic cardinal principles based on which this national education policy is developed. The first structural transformation of higher education in India after 70 years is today, given by this national education policy. All these days we had only one superior body called University Grants Commission, and it was supported by or having a federal system of various commissions and committees and councils. But today, the National Education Policy 2020 says there shall be one superior apex national body. It is a new system altogether. It is called Higher Education Commission of India, HECI, and that shall be the apex body of higher education in India of any type of education, whether it is primary or secondary or tertiary or professional or technical or teacher education or legal education or medical education, whatnot. And this will be the policy making body. It will be policy reviewing body. It is the highest authority in India as far as the education is concerned. Then it will be having 4 vertices. In other words, 4 pillars to support it. The first pillar, and all of them are independent of each other. It's not that one is subordinate to other. They are all complementary to each other, and they're all assisted by, or supported by, or regulated by the Higher Education Commission of India. The first body is known as the regulatory body, which is called National Higher Education Regulatory Council. This will be a new body to come into existence. It is meant only for regulation of higher education in India. This is a very, very important development. But it will control all the sectors of education except medical and legal education. For the reason is that already they have got a separate commissions enacted by the laws of, by Parliament. Hence, National Medical Commission and the legal education system have already been enacted about 2 years back, and they are going to regulate them. Hence, except these two, there will be one regulatory body called National Higher Education Regulatory Council. So UGC will lose its regulatory function. Then the second body, the vertices, which is independent of its own again, is National Accreditation Council. Friends, you know that we already got National Assessment Accreditation Council. It is also an autonomous body, and it has come out with the support and the statutory regulations of the UGC, and it is having the mandate to give assessment and accreditation certification to all Indian institutions, universities as well as colleges. But now they would like to make it as a National Accreditation Council of a different kind, where with the help of various assessment accreditation agencies, so there can be multiple agencies in India henceforth for assessment and accreditation. We are not sure whether it is only government or private partnership based agencies, but the report says there will be multiple agencies to give assessment and accreditation to higher education, and that will be regulated by National Accreditation Council. So in all probability, the existing NAC will become NAC, that is NAAC will become NAC, and we will have number of subordinate agencies to give assessment and accreditation. So the regulatory function will be given to National Accreditation Council, whereas the assessment component will be given to the assessment and accreditation agencies, which will be certified or regulated by National Accreditation Council. And the third body, which is the vertices, which is again independent of its own, is the present UGC will be converted as Higher Education Grants Council. Instead of UGC, it will become HEGC. In other words, its power is meant only to give funds to the development and growth and development of higher education in India, but it will not be a regulatory body when once the entire new education policy is implemented. So only the financial aspect is retained by it, and all the regulatory powers have been transferred to the regulatory body, namely NHERC. And the last one is also a very, very important component. If the first three are important from the point of structure and finance, the last one is important from the point of the curriculum design, development, transaction, delivery, and evaluation. Hence, this entire standard of education is going to be decided by this particular body. Hence, it is known as General Education Council. It will be giving thrust to learning outcome rather than just process. All these days we give importance to learning processes, namely the pedagogic developments and dissemination of knowledge and transfer of knowledge. But henceforth we will be giving importance to learning outcome. In other words, what is the outcome of the entire system, and what is the output of the system, and in what way it's going to have impact on the society. It is known as General Education Council, and this will be assisted by two more national bodies called National Higher Education Quality Framework. This National Higher Education Quality Framework, a body at national level, is going to define what should be the defining element of quality in terms of the teachers, in terms of the curriculum, the transaction, the delivery, the design, as well as the evaluation component, and how to measure the transfer of knowledge and so on and so forth. And it will also be assisted by one more national council called National Skill Quality Framework. As I told you, today we give importance not only to knowledge but also to skills and competencies. So skills and competencies are the ones which ultimately give employability to a given student. Hence, these two bodies, NHEQF and NSQF, you are going to guide the General Education Council in terms of its standard of the curriculum design, development, and learning outcome. Then, what will be the status of existing bodies, which is likely to be converted as a Higher Education Grant Commission without any regulatory powers? The existing councils like ICAR, that is the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, Veterinary Council of India, Indian National Commission for Teacher Education, and Council of Architecture and others, and even AICTE, they will all be converted as, this is the very, very important component, please listen to me carefully, they will be converted as National Professional Standard Setting Bodies, PSSB. They lose their regulatory functions. They will no longer be regulatory bodies, but they will be standard setting bodies. They will going to say what is the standard required of a particular type of profession, vocation, as well as higher education institution, from the point of its infrastructure, from the point of the resource, finances, and the expected outcome, and regarding the curriculum design, development, and learning outcome. They will be invited as members of General Education Council. So they all these body members they will become the invited members to GEC. In other words, they will lose their regulatory function, but they continue as national professional standard setting bodies. Please remember this. But there is no clarity on the status of Dental Council of India, INC, that is the Indian Nursing Council, and Pharmacy Council of India. Probably they may become part of medical sector, namely the medical education sector, and continue as the bodies along with medical education, or they may become the professional standard setting bodies just like ICAR or VCI and so on. So this is a very, very important development. Then National Medical Commission, just now I told you in 1918-19 itself, Government of India has enacted an act through Parliament called National Medical Commission to regulate medical education in India. Similarly, there is likelihood of the National Dental Council. We are not sure, but there is likelihood, or we are not sure in what way the government is going to deal with BCI, INC and PCI. So, but NMC and BCI, that is namely Bar Council of India, definitely they are going to continue as regulatory bodies under the Higher Education Commission of India. Then there is an advisory body to Government of India and to any education committee, that's called Central Advisory Board of Education, SABE, CABE. This is going to be strengthened with the new policies and perspectives. Then the next one is, after reforming the higher education at the top level, namely at the central level, the next level is of the universities and colleges. All these days we had College of Science, for example, Virani Science College, or Technical University, or Health Science University, or Pharmacy University, or Veterinary University, and so on and so forth. But the National Education Policy says that there will be no scope henceforth for monofaculty universities or colleges. Only large multi-faculty, multidisciplinary institutions and universities and colleges will be permitted. In other words, all these days we used to say small is beautiful. A college with 300 students, with 20 teachers, used to become a unit, and we used to run that as a college, and a university of 1,000 students, and so on and so forth. But and monofaculty colleges were there, monofaculty universities were there. But according to National Education Policy, there is no scope for monofaculty universities or colleges. Any university or college must be multi-faculty. In other words, art, science, commerce put together, management put together, science, technology all put together. Even health science universities also should have the social sciences, humanities, as well as management, and so on and so forth. And they expect that university or a college means minimum around 300 plus students should be, 3,000 students should be there per institution by 2030. In other words, they want to see a functional, viable unit of around 3,000 plus students with around 300 teachers, to say that this is an education institution which is multi-faculty and multidisciplinary in its approach and transmission. And there will be only one nomenclature. We have so many types of universities: central university, state private university, state government university, aided university, unaided university, deemed university, institutions of national importance, and so on and so forth. So there are multiplicity of the institutions which can give degrees. But henceforth, there will be only one type of university. There will be no prefix or suffix to this word. Whether it's private or government, central or state, there will be only one word. This is a very, very important development to bring about uniformity in higher education. Then at present, we have got around 40,000 plus colleges and 800 plus universities. But the aim of this national education policy is to have around 15,000 multidisciplinary institutions. In other words, they would like to merge these 800 and 40,000 colleges into around 15,000 viable multidisciplinary institutions. In other words, lot of mergers will take place, just like companies merging at the industrial level, at trade and commerce level, probably at education sector also, they are looking into viable functional units. So the standard education of global level can be given to the Indian students at any level. So when I say how to bring them together, the possibility is only one. Either you have to merge every one of them together or to make them as clusters. So just like a pearl garland is made up of number of pearls bound through a thread. Similarly, they want to bring higher education clusters are known as knowledge hubs. And they want to have three types of institutions. Teaching university with emphasis on teaching. Research is subsidiary. Nowadays, what is happening? We say university is meant for teaching and research. Neither teaching is emphasized nor research is emphasized, and you lost the track. Hence, they want to emphasize this time very clearly teaching university with emphasis mainly on teaching, postgraduate and undergraduate teaching and research, the subsidiary. Whereas second one is research university. Multidisciplinary education and research university is called MERU, MERU, multi-disciplinary research institutions. Multidisciplinary education research universities, MERU. And this emphasis is mainly on the research. Teaching is subsidiary. In other words, we expect more number of patents, publications, etc. to come from this research university. So the teachers who are working here should mainly work towards research, not teaching. But teaching is subsidiary or supplementary. Then abolition of affiliating system by 2035. In fact, Indian subcontinent, namely India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and various other countries, which are there in South Asia, we are the only countries in the world who are still following affiliating system, which is a British legacy. British themselves have left it, but we have continued it. So the government of India, through this national education policy, envisages that the affiliating system will be abolished by 2035. From 2030, by 2035, there will be no affiliated colleges or affiliating systems only, or systems. Only colleges will remain as either as university colleges or constituent colleges or autonomous colleges. So graded autonomy to existing colleges based on accreditation is given. In other words, they become either you have a college which is degree awarding college, or it become a constituent college of a university, or a part of the university, one of the three. In other words, existing big college can become a university. A small college can become, after the cluster concept, they can become a degree awarding university. Little bigger cluster can become a university. Thus, they are aiming at consolidation and integration rather than the fusion process. They are going for fusion technology or fusion process. Then this is the internationalization of higher education is a very, very novel concept that is present in the 21st century. But I feel that it is a bit late on this particular concept. All these days there is a debate in India as to whether we should allow foreign universities to come to India or not. But the debate remained as a debate. There was a lot of opposition to it, both from within the government level, outside the government level, and various other states. But today, the government of India has come out with a policy that henceforth they will give permission to foreign universities to establish their campus in India. But they have a rider. Only the best of the foreign universities, about 100 foreign universities, which are considered the best, they only will be permitted to start with to establish their universities in Indian soil. But today, the world is so competitive, but we expect that they may come. But about 25 years back, definitely they would have come. Today, I'm doubtful whether the standard universities will make up their mind to come to India or not. I'm not sure. But we should welcome this particular development, because foreign universities will bring a lot of competitions to Indian existing universities. And if Indian universities have to survive, they have to give quality education of global standards, then only they can survive and compete with foreign universities and vice versa. Hence, I appreciate this particular policy of Government of India, and I hope that this will be a reality. Then they would like to not only invite foreign universities to India, they would like to make India as a global education destination. Today, around 1/3 of the higher education scenario students, particularly in professional education, higher education, not in liberal and arts, science and commerce, they are going abroad for their higher education. But they would like to retain them in India. At the same time, they would like to invite foreign students to come to India and study. And probably India will become a best global education destination for simple reason that the cost of education compared to foreign countries will be definitely low in India for various reasons. That you have got natural resources, you have got human resource, qualified human resource, and also various other aspects. So inviting foreign students to study in India and vice versa is a possibility. Then the next one is very, very important. All these days we had such a rigid structure that a student who is studying in Rajkot or in Ahmedabad or in Saurashtra, they were not able to move freely from one university to another university. There are a lot of hassles, and they could not, when they cannot move from one university to another university or one state to another city, the question of moving to some other state or other union territory was a tall order. Hence, to put full stop to all this, one of the novel development of this particular national education policy 2020 is creation of academic bank of credit. That that is, any student, they can earn credits, which ultimately indicates the quantum of knowledge and skills that the student has imbibed over that period of time, and he can accumulate, and that can be accumulated in a bank called academic bank of credits at a national level. And credit transfer from one institution to another institution is possible. When a student is going to accumulate given number of credits, then he will be eligible for a degree. No doubt it's still in a very, very fluid state, but when we work out, naturally it's going to be reality, and the student definitely will be able to move from one university to another university, one college to another university to acquire credits, and ultimately you will not be denied of a degree. You will be you'll be given an opportunity to take degree with credit transfer. This is going to be a novelty if it is introduced in a proper perspective. But that brings one important concept of study anywhere, anytime, with flexible curriculum, with flexible time frame. For the time being, we say within 3 years a student has to complete the postgraduate degree. Within 5 years, the student has to complete the undergraduate degree. I'm just giving an example. But with this flexible curriculum and flexible time frame, probably the student will be able to complete the degree and get the degree, both knowledge, skills, and competencies. At the same time, you can say, yes, I've become a graduate. In other words, this aim is moved towards lessening the dropout rate because of the rigid curriculum, rigid framework. And there is no choice for the student at present. He has to take a rigid selection of subjects, either science or arts or commerce, whatever may be the case. There is no integration. There is no choice for the students. So twinning program is going to be at the order of the day. A student can study a few programs, few courses in one university, other few courses in another university, and then get a degree. Then promotion to open distance digital learning. Thanks to COVID-19 pandemic, the only good impact of, I don't say good, the only positive impact, I should say, of the COVID-19 pandemic on our education system is that all these days teachers were reluctant to accept digital learning, open learning, and distance learning. Now we are forced to accept them as part of higher education. This is one of the important transformation that has taken place. Then government also encourages a memorandum of understanding. Memorandum of understanding between the institutions of India and abroad, and also amongst the institutions within India regarding academics, research, and extension. And the National Education Policy envisages that every university should have the Center for International Education, so that the students can be given opportunity to come to India from abroad without any legal or other issues. Then importance has been given to research also. One of the very important paradigm shift that we are seeing through this national education policy is creation of National Research Foundation called NRF. It will be an autonomous statutory body for promotion, funding, and regulating research. And it initial proposed budget is around 20,000 crores per year. It's going to enhance every year. This is one of the very important moves. All these days we are telling that there is no budget for research in India, and probably government has to go a long way in this particular process, because the government said as a corporate social responsibility, all the institutions should give some percentage of their profit towards the extension, academics, and research. But that is happening in a very fluid way. There is no consolidation. Probably through this National Research Foundation, Government of India and National Education Policy is aiming at creating the corpus through a National Research Foundation, where the eligible research projects can be given funding, so that we can see the fruits of it. More of patents and more of copyrights can come out because of this. It's a very, very novel initiative. We should welcome it. Then to enhance investment in research and development. At present, the investment of Indian budget to research is only 0.7% of GDP. Whereas in USA it is 2.8%, Israel 4.3%, South Korea 4.8%. That indicates why they are developing so fast with so many patents and innovations and creativity. So in this context, this creation of National Research Foundation is a welcome sign. Then robust ecosystem for research and innovation. Many of our students are interested in undertaking research, but our rigid curriculum, our rigid structure, rigid framework doesn't allow them to convert their creativity and talent into the product or the process. And they cannot claim that they are innovators. But this particular policy on academic research definitely is going to enhance innovations through innovative councils. Already we have got Atal innovative councils in all the institutions thanks to MHRD. Probably that is going to be strengthened further with fundings. And they are going to create the national grid and international grid in terms of industries and industries as well as scientific institutions, colleges and universities and so on and so forth, on both government model, semi-government model, and private public model and private models. Then thrust to need-based education, need-based research for national and rural development, sustainable development. In other words, research should not be only at the basic level or nor at the applied level. It should be a holistic blend of all, namely health, agriculture, food, shelter, transport, education, trade, commerce, IT, BT, nanotechnology, and energy. For example, we were all deficient in energy. Now, a lot of non-conventional energy resources are coming up. We are trying to tap solar energy to the biggest extent so that one day we'll become totally energy sufficient. We don't depend upon energy at all. Probably a day will be the day for India, golden letter for India, where we say we are totally free from the foreign import of the energy resources, that we are able to transform whatever the solar energy, hydroelectric energy that is possible in India, will be making us self-sufficient and self-reliant. As our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister always says, Atmanirbhar Bharata, or self-sufficiency and self-reliance. Next is research on Indian resources and heritages. We Indians, at times we have forgotten our own natural resources, our own human resources, and our own heritages and our culture. It is high time that we retain the Indian culture, heritage, from the point of its goodness, from the point of its carry-over system, particularly the heritages. There are a lot of good messages in the Indian traditions and heritage. For example, yoga and meditation is the best means for the human wellness. Naturally, the government of India will be aiming at transforming the existing Indian resources into global resources and Indian heritage into a global heritage. Then present research funding agencies like ICMR, ICAR, DST, DBT, DOE, UGC, CSIR, and ICHR and others will continue to be funding agencies for their specific spheres of research. Encouraging private-public partnership as well as private participation in India. Earlier, private institutions were not at all heard of in India about 20 years back. But since 20 years, we are seeing good number of private institutions in India thanks to Government of Indian liberalization policy, namely LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. But Government of India wants to go one step further to simplify the procedure for the establishment of Indian institutions through philanthropy or through corporate sectors or through company or through society or through the semi-government and government or PPP models. So there will be boost for PP models or PPP models for higher education in India. Atmiya Education Society is one of the best examples for PP model and P model of higher education in Rajkot, thanks to the visionary Swamiji and his visionary zeal. Emphasis to good governance, financial stability. When we say private university, we give importance to its good governance, financial stability and security and austerity measures and probity. Then transparency, accountability, public disclosure, grievance and redressal. Then all these days people are worried because private institutions mean there will be too many inspections by government, namely red tapeism by bureaucracy. Government of India through this national education policy assures the private partners that inspection will be replaced by self-open disclosure system with checks and balances. Today we are already seeing NIRF and NAC. We are going for public disclosure system through their website and through the documentation, through the digitalization process and so on. Naturally, a day will come wherein through self-disclosed documents only we can see what the institution is. And broad regulatory framework, which will be common to both. This is a very important development. They would like to bring one regulation which is common to any type of university. Now we have got a separate act for central, separate act for state, separate act for private, separate act for deemed university, for autonomous college, and so on and so forth. But this national education policy promises that they are going to have one common, uniform framework of regulations for academics, administration, and finance. If this is going to be reality, I really welcome this particular move, and I thank the government of India and the leaders for this visionary step. Common regulations, norms, and nomenclature for government or semi-government or private public universities will ease the process of understanding and running the education institutions at common level. This is a very, very welcome step. And when we say private education, people are always afraid that Indian government is leading to privatization. But there is a hitch, or there is a rider here. We allow private partnership for private agency or private public partnership on an important basis. It should not be for profiteering. So there will be no commercialization. There is no profit making. There will be transparent fee structure. It is based on open disclosure system of the accounts and the expenditure. Then power to fix the fee structure will be with the university, but it will be subjected to regulations. Probably the government of India will fix a higher ceiling limit and a lower ceiling limit. Within that only the private universities and private colleges will be able to fix the fees. In other words, there is a ceiling, both upper limit as well as the lower limit. This is really a welcome move, so that good institutions can charge slightly higher, a medium institution can charge medium rate, and a lower institution can charge slightly lower, depending upon what type of the infrastructural facilities they give. In other words, there will be graded fee structure depending upon the quality education, quality infrastructure, quality resources, and so on. The progressive regime of fee discrimination based on accreditation. So accreditation plays a very important role. So please remember this. Accreditation means quality. Quality initiatives, quality sustenance, and quality enhancement measures play a very important role, because higher the grade means they will have more autonomy to fix their fee structure and also their curriculum as well as their design, development, and delivery. Then there will be independent board of governors for institutions. There will be common regulations for the board of governors to be constituted. In other words, there will be a blend of academicians, experts, not only from the private sector but also from the government and industrial sector. Then this is the very important component for liberal education. We are not sure that this model is going to be applied for the technical education or the professional education, but for liberal education, yes. The present 3 years degree program will continue, but it will be having one more rider. If it is 3 years program, it will be called as BSc or BA, BCom General. Or a student can continue for 4 years and it will be called as 4 years honors program. So in other words, a student is encouraged to study for graduation 4 years degree program. It is called BSc, BA, BCom honors program, where the fourth will be meant for specialization and research. First 3 years will be general type, and there will be a concept of major and minor, where major component gives the type of degree he wants, whereas the minor ones, student can take any subject of his choice. It could be art, science, commerce, management, even it could be vocational education, it could be anything, it could be service which is offered, so that there will be total flexibility in the curriculum. There will be student's choice, particularly for minor subjects and also major subjects. Then PG program, if it is for 4 year students program, for 4 years degree, it will be 1 year. If it's a 3 year degree, it will be 2 years program. So PG program could be either 1 year or 2 years depending upon the input. Then integrated UG PG. If there is integrated UG PG leading to MA, MSc, MCom or MBA, it will be 5 years. Then at present, B.Ed is a 2 years program. It is totally away from the existing colleges. Earlier, Government of India thought they should be part of the education system itself. But somehow for the last 25 years, they all came up as independent D.Ed, B.Ed, M.Ed colleges. The reason was that they were standing as standalone institutions, and there is no integration between them and the arts, science, commerce colleges and the schools. But today, Government of India says there will be integrated B.Ed with BA or BSc. In other words, a student can continue for 4 years and get a degree called BSc Ed. Suppose an existing student for the last so many years, the existing students, if they want to do B.Ed, then they can have a degree program of B.Ed either for 2 years or 1 year. If it are from postgraduate sector, it will be 1 year. If it is from undergraduate sector of 3 years, it will be 2 years program. MPhil is going to be discontinued. But there are many educationists who are saying that MPhil is a redundant degree. Hence, this committee has recommended that MPhil need not be present. It is not going to add any value to the existing system, whereas PhD will be continued. The rider is that a PhD scholar henceforth should become a teaching assistant. He should become a teacher also, so that when he is doing research, he will be getting expertise as a teacher by teaching the subject for the undergraduate or the postgraduate level, whatever may be. And remember now, there will be no standalone degree colleges, there will be no standalone education colleges. Both of them will be merged. It will be a multi-faculty college like arts, science, commerce with education, so that they can give to 4 years degree or 4 years degree with B.Ed or so on and so forth. So the shift is study anywhere, anytime with flexible curriculum and with blend of higher education with vocational education. All these days we were looking vocational education as a with a stepmotherly attitude, thinking that it is of a low order. But the Government of India wants to emphasize vocational education is as important as any other form of higher education. And they give so much of importance to vocational education that it is going to be an integral component of higher education. Whatever may be the type of degree, vocational component is going to be there in curriculum design and development. And multiple entry, multiple exit point. For example, a student after 1 year, for various reasons, if you want to leave, you'll be leaving with a certificate. After second year, you will be leaving with an advanced diploma. Third year, you will be leaving with a degree. In other words, at any level, he can enter, or any level he can exit, and he can go for accumulation of the credits, and he can get a certification or a diploma or a degree. In other words, student will not be denied of a certification for having studied for 1 or 2 years. All these days, there are many dropouts without any certification. That will be addressed to by this National Education Commission. Then all these days, many of the universities did away, they removed this concept of major and minor. Some of the institutes are still following it, but they were rigid. Among science only major and minor, among arts only major and minor. Now this major minor concept is going to have a paradigm shift where the student can choose multidisciplinary subjects available within one umbrella with multi-faculty institutions and multi-faculty programs. For example, a student of medicine can take some subject of biomedical engineering. A student of engineering can take a subject of biotechnology and so on and so forth, which was not possible all these days. Because all these days the compartments are so rigid that we have got very rigid compartmentalization of the subject. PCM means only PCM, PCB means only PCB, CBZ means only CBZ, HEP means only HEP. But nowadays these combinations are going to change, and the student can move easily from one faculty to another faculty and ultimately get what is expected. Even music can be a component, yoga can be a component, meditation can be a component, and pottery can be a component, electricity can be electrician can be a component. The sky is the limit as far as subjects are concerned. That's how we envisage. And someone was telling in one of the webinars that even masonry worker, even that also can become a vocational education component. Even plastering of a wall, which is neither in engineering college nor in arts, science, commerce college. They're all in. They are learned through the art of what is known as apprentice system. We can give scientific background to it. So that's the reason why we are trying to remove totally blue collar job or white collar job. We would like to have a blend of blue and green and white colored jobs, so that the student will be ready for the employment and is employable with both skills and competencies. Then curriculum. will be based on choice-based credit system. So there will be a credit system, there will be choice, and it will be carryover, and that will be credit transfer. All these aspects will make the curriculum totally flexible. And integrated holistic choice of subjects. I told you this disparity between art, science, commerce, management, STEM. All these days we gave a lot of importance to STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. For any technology, this STEM was important, but it was not having any of the prefixes or suffixes. But today we like to bring an integration of all these, so that a student will understand what is society and what is human being, what is the psychology of human body, a human being, and so on and so forth. Paradigm shift in professional education. For example, we had only medical college, only nursing college, only physiotherapy college, or only engineering college, only management college. No standalone professional colleges and professional institutions. Thanks to our visionary Swamiji, Atmiya group of institutions, it was only Atmiya Institute of Technology and AITS, Technology and Science. But today we are having a number of social sciences, and various other branches, liberal science into it. That's already we are moving towards it. Then no standalone professional universities, and they must become multi-faculty, multidisciplinary universities and colleges, autonomous or constituent, before 2030. In other words, by within 10 years, all these universities and all these colleges with their standalone monofaculty institutions shall become multi-faculty institutions or colleges, and no affiliation system, but all of them should be either constituent colleges or degree awarding colleges or autonomous colleges. And even the health profession education, we have got allopathy, Ayurveda, homeopathy, Siddha, the Irani, and so on and so forth. But this national education policy aims at blend of diverse pathies as a holistic treatment for wellness of the human being, which was not tested all these days. They were all working in isolation. Now, for example, in Corona, there are a lot of treatments both from allopathy, homeopathy, as well as Ayurveda, Siddha, and so forth. This is a very good opportunity for all these pathies to say that in an integrated way, we can treat the patient, and we can aim at wellness of the human being. And National Medical Commission will be continued. Status of DCI, INC, and PCI, that is Pharmacy in India, is not clear in this act, but we have to wait and see. Then other councils will become a national professional standard setting bodies, professional standard setting bodies, PSSB, the remaining bodies. Then use of technology. Though we started using technology, it was all optional. Some institutions use them in a higher way. Some of them started using only for nominal sake. But as I told you, one of the positive impact of COVID on society and education was we have to adopt technology. Without that, you would not have conducted classes, examinations, and so on and so forth. In this, the very important novel development is establishment of National Education Technology Forum. NETF, National Educational Technology Forum. This will be an autonomous body on development of IT tools. This is very, very important. We are in need of national level, national standardized tools and softwares for education institutions. Hope you will expect it from this particular body, both for infrastructure, hardware development, as well as software development, which is the need of the hour for education, both rural as well as urban. So we welcome this particular move with very good budgetary provisions. Hope this will be a reality. Then National Committee for Integration of Vocational Education with Higher Education. All these days, as I told you, vocational education was given a stepmotherly attitude. Nobody gave importance to it. And there was what is known as a dichotomy in education. Vocational education one string and higher education other string. They would like to blend it and say education is one string, vocational or non-vocational. And we expect that every student should have a vocational component in him so that he can become an employable graduate. The next component is very, very important, that there will be a national digital repository. All these days, a student, if he loses a mark sheet, he had to go to that university, give so many, what should I say, undertakings, and then get a duplicate and so on. And if some university wants to appoint him, they used to write to that university to see the authenticity of that record and so on. It used to take months. By the time the student might have lost the opportunity also. Thanks to the vision of Government of India, this national education policy aims at creating national digital repository where all the academic records of a student of an institution, whichever he has earned from directly from the institutions, are recorded here, and the student will be given a password. Student will be having an ID component so that he can retrieve this particular certificate from anywhere, anytime in the world, so that within few minutes you will be able to access his records. Similarly, the employers also can check the authenticity of these records within a fraction of a second by sending the email to this digital repository. This is really a very, very good move from the point of students regarding the records as well as their certifications. The next one is National Virtual Laboratory. Today, the entire world has become virtual. In our COVID era, during lockdown, though we are not supposed to move from one place to another, we are not physically connected, but we are connected through the mobile as well as through digital network. Hence, we are almost in a virtual world, as we always say. We are all connected, we are speaking to each other, we are seeing each other, but we are not physically present. That is virtual concept. So why can't we have the concept of virtual laboratories, where we can conduct experiments? Students also can conduct experiments through virtual means, so that it saves lot of energy, lot of chemicals and glasswares. But some people may say virtual is virtual, there is no real experience. But after practicing it, they can as well come to the laboratory to practice it, so that there is perfection. There is a availability of repetition for a student. So virtual laboratory, a virtual concept of the laboratory is a very, very good move, where computer simulations can take place. Virtual laboratories can be created. It can be shared by everybody. Today, many of the students learn many of the concepts of science and technology through these virtual concepts or computer simulations. How a molecule moves, how the electron moves, and so on and so forth. Then, as I told you, Industrial Revolution 4 is known for what is known as disruptive technology. I gave only one example. Because of one Android mobile, so many industries were totally shattered into pieces. They no longer exist. So that is the impact of the disruptive technology concept today. And when these concepts come, for example, the language, mission language, and artificial intelligence, and 3D concepts, when they all come, the existing technologies will disappear like anything. So a day may come wherein a teacher can be present virtually in a student's home to teach. That could be the way we can envisage the virtual concept. This virtual reality, VR concept, is already becoming a reality. Hope, but these three initiatives, namely digital repositories, virtual laboratories, and disruptive technology, is going to have a reality date one day to give maximum emphasis to the students, where they can learn from anywhere, anytime. So we can use technology at all levels: education, planning, teaching, learning, assessment, administration, management, regulation, self-disclosure, minimum human interference. If I want to know what is Atmiya Group of Institutions, I need not come to Rajkot. Through website, I can see. I can go for detour through the website only as to what it has, what it doesn't have. Through self-disclosure, I can see what is the input and output of that particular institution. And similarly, we have to enhance the bandwidth, and they have to give internet connectivity to disadvantaged group who are present in a rural area, tribal area, so that they can learn. And Divyangs also should have access to digital tools and softwares. Then e-content for regional languages. One of the Indian scenario is we have got more than 600 languages and around more than 15 to 20 recognized languages in India. And there is a craze for people to learn in different languages. And it's always said that when you learn in mother tongue, when you learn in your regional tongue, you learn it faster and you remember it. And there is an adage that a man thinks in his native, even in thinking also, he thinks from in his mother tongue. When that being the truth, naturally we should give importance to regional languages. We cannot ignore it in the name of international language. So e-content also should be developed in regional languages, so that students can understand in their own mother tongue. Then digitally equipped schools, colleges, teachers, and students is a must. So I'm running out of the time, and I would like to give just a few more glimpses before I conclude. the national education policy also gives importance to the growth and development of Indian knowledge systems. All the days we had ignored Indian knowledge system to such an extent that we thought that Indian knowledge system is zero. Ayurveda is zero. Indian languages are zero. Culture is zero. Heritage is zero. It doesn't have any global impact. But today, the entire world is aware that Indian knowledge has got power. Indian culture has power. Indian heritage has power. Indian Vedas have power. Indian Sanskrit language has power. And its culture has power. Its values have power. Establishment of Indian Institute of Translation and Interpretation. This is a very, very important step. We should welcome it. So that whatever is available in local languages and all can be translated into the international languages so that it can be disseminated. I would like to say here, Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali was known only in India. Only not translated into English, people of Western countries came to know what is the value of that particular contribution of Rabindranath Tagore, which led to the Nobel Prize. That indicates the power of translation and interpretation. Then strengthening of national institutions for promotion of classical languages, literature, ancient history, art and culture. Many people go abroad for foreign trips. But I would like to ask a question. How many of you have seen your own India? Have you seen the cultural heritages, spots and art and architecture of India, the cultural heritage of India? The answer is sometimes no, because we think that what we have is nothing. This concept should change. Only to bring this transformation, the national education policy envisages this. Focus on literature, scientific vocabulary of Indian languages and dictionaries. Thanks to Wikipedia, today, within a minute and fraction of a second, I can find out what is the origin of a particular word, what is the origin of a particular substance, and so on and so forth. Similarly, we should develop Indian dictionaries also for what we call them. See, there are no synonyms of Indian cultural heritage points in foreign languages. So we have to retain them. Similarly, language faculty and translators. Today, there is a lot of demand for translators. We should enhance them. Research on languages, history, art, Indology, culture, heritage, and tourism. So all of them are very much important. Then cultural awareness of our Indian knowledge systems. Many a times we always say that Indian knowledge is, as I told you repeatedly, we think that Indian knowledge is not at all there. But those foreign countries, those who know the importance of Indian knowledge system, for example, Germany gives a lot of importance to study Sanskrit because they say a lot of knowledge treasure is hidden in the Sanskrit language and its literature. So it's high time that we realize the importance of Sanskrit and our literature and ultimately understand the importance of it. For example, Indian system always aims at wellness rather than diseases. When we aim at illness, disease disappear. Promoting traditional arts, Lok Vidya. We are, in the name of the internationalization, we have forgotten what is Indian art, what is the Indian tradition, and what is the Indian culture. So it's high time that we retain them. Hence, Lok Vidya must should be the part and parcel of higher education. Scholarships and fellowships must be enhanced, and gender inclusion fund is a must to encourage women to come to the main fold. The other features are establishment and strengthening of academies, promotion of adult and continuing education, restructuring of teacher education. As I told you already, the B.Ed college will be totally restructured. Then restructuring of vocational education. BVOC is going to be continued, MOC is going to be continued, and it will be given primary importance and equal importance to MOC and BVOC, just like BA, BCom and BSc. Then their integration with higher education as multi-faculty, multidisciplinary education institutions offering such programs is going to be a reality. The other features are teaching teachers recruitment policies are going to be changed. Policies on FDP and PDPs are going to be changed. MOOCs is going to be the order of the day. We can develop faculty, the FDPs and PDPs can be only through MOOCs, only through the virtual mode. You need not go to a particular place to learn something. Only for practicals you can go. Award and rewards for teachers at national and state level. Special education zones, where the education is having less gross enrollment ratio and less emphasis. We can create special economic zones to give impetus. More scholarships and features, I told you. Emphasis to equity, social justice, gender representation, social privilege, and to Divyangs, blended teaching and learning. In fact, blended teaching and learning is one thing we advocated for the last 10 years. It's going to be reality. In other words, traditional as well as ICT enabled, as well as online, as well as digital mode and whatnot. Next, national vision and mentoring. This is a very, very important concept that is coming up. In other words, we used to ignore the experts of industry, retired people. But this national education policy is aiming at pooling of the experts' resources as teachers, researchers, industrialists, entrepreneurs, and the success story winners as the mentors, so that they can use as guest faculty in any of the colleges to motivate students to transfer knowledge to the youngsters, to transfer skills to the youngsters, which is now we have lost it, but we have to retain it through this. Then independent board of governors, as I told you. Not was the least, before I conclude, friends, as I told you, that I have highlighted only the major structural and functional reforms of higher education through this National Education Policy 2020. But the major crux of the transformation of higher education through National Education Policy is in primary education, because it is going to bring a seesaw change, I should say, a paradigm shift, which nobody has thought of as is there in national education policy. So I will be using only one slide to highlight that particular component. That component is, all these days we used to say compulsory primary education starts from 6th year and up to 14th year. And the government is responsible only for this. But for the first time, Government of India has acknowledged that education should start from 3rd year of age of a student, of a child. In other words, from 3rd year is a formative year. Up to 18th year is a formative period. So we should give importance to the transformation of the human brain from 3rd year onwards itself. Hence, they give importance to the development of the human intelligence, brain empowerment during the first 5 years. That is 3 years of pre-primary and 2 years of primary is known as foundation stage. So the existing nursery, UKG and LKG and UKG will become the first 3 years plus first and second standard of the primary. All these 5 years will be considered as foundation stage. Then 3rd and 4th and 5th will become the primary or preparatory period. So it is class number 3, 4 and 5. Then 6, 7 and 8 will be 1 unit. Class 6, 7 and 8 will be 1 unit for 3 years. It is known as the middle stage. 6, 7 and 8. In other words, you have taken 1 year of this higher secondary and 2 years of the primary middle college, middle school to take it as a middle stage. Then second stage is the 9th and 10th standard of the existing high school and 11th and 12th of the pre-university or intermediate will be taken as second stage, a 4 years component. This has been done mainly to lessen the tension that students are undergoing today because of the coaching classes to crack NEET, JEE, as well as various other CAT and other entrance examinations. They would like to get a blend of the first 2 years of high school, namely 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th of the intermediate, so that they will be in one particular unit. There will be total transformation of the student from the middle level school to the secondary stage, so that they will become ready to go to the technical education or the professional education or liberal education, as the case may be. In other words, this entire structure is going to replace 10 plus 2 plus 3 concept to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 3 or 4 of a degree. This is a very important paradigm shift in primary and secondary education is concerned, but I don't want to go into these details. All said and done, any policy will be good or bad from the points of implementation. So in implementation should be in letter and spirit, and the government says that it is committed to implement it in letter and spirit, and they are given the timeline. But from 2020 itself, the implementation started, and the evidence for it is already the Government of India has renamed its Department of MHRD as Department of Education, and they have already started implementing the flexible curriculum, the credit transfer, etc. from the year 2020-21 in central universities and 21-22 from in state and other universities. That itself indicates the zeal and the determination of the Government of India to implement it. Let us hope that it will be implemented in letter and spirit. It requires plan of action, timeline for implementation stages, functional transformation wherever possible at the earliest, realignment of functions. As I told you, since it's going to be merger, there is realignment of the functions. Then structural transformation. When once we bring alignment of different groups, naturally there will be a need for structural transformation. Then new acts are required, statutes are required, regulations are required, rules are required. Hope within another 2-3 years we'll have all these in place. The reallotment of specified funds. So there will be new order for allotment of funds, flow of funds. Because UGC will be abolished, it will be transformed into a funding agency, and there are other agencies. So naturally, there will be a new rule and new regulatory framework for disbursement of the funds. Then there will be coordination between the center, state, and public-private partnership. Naturally, this is the highlight. As long as there is good coordination between the private, public, and state government and central government, education definitely blossoms. Otherwise, it will be having a checkered career. Before I conclude, let me say that we are into 150th birth anniversary of our legendary leader and the one who got independence to India as the first servant of India, Mahatma Gandhi ji. And we can give a befitting tribute to him because he said education should address 3 important components, namely H, and H. Education to head, namely the knowledge. Education to hands, namely the skills. Education to head and hands together, namely the skills transforming into competence and attitude. And education to H, last H, means heart, namely education to heart means values. Until unless the education is with values, then the education has a value. Education without a value has no value. So education system all these days has failed, if at all, if we say, I don't say it has failed, but it has a checkered career, checkered history. It has not failed. Let me say, if India has developed so far, it's mainly because of the contributions made by our forefathers, our teachers, and our students, and the present and last generation. Otherwise, India would not have come up to this particular level as one of the fast developing progressive nation in the world. And everyone is recognizing the importance of India. But what is important today is we have to add this component of heart, namely value system, into our education. It should not be seen as a separate entity. It should be blended with the knowledge. It should be blended with skills. It should be blended with the attitude. In other words, whatever we do, whatever we think, and whatever we act should be for the betterment of the human kind, for the betterment of the entire universe, entire nature, and ultimately sustainable development. Live and let live. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's why I say this national education policy, if it is implemented in letter and spirit with all zeal and enthusiasm, and give importance to the Indianization of higher education, and not in terms of the age-old methods, but in terms of the value system. Many people mistake when we say Indian system means they think of in a different way, in a negative way. I am always a person to think that when we say Indianization, it is in terms of its value system. Indian value systems are second to none. And this value system must and should be integrated into the educational system. Only then education is going to be a reality, and it is going to be a cornerstone of socio-economic development. It will be a harbinger of socio-economic development in India. With these few words, once again, my pranams to His Holiness Sri Hariprasad Swamiji. My salutations to him. With these few words, let me conclude by saying that I'm indebted to, I'm really honored that I was given an opportunity to address my fellow colleagues and the students on this occasion of Teachers' Day. So I salute I submit my humble salutations to Sri Hariprasad Swamiji, Sri Tyagvallabh Swamiji, and all the teaching fraternity of Atmiya group of institutions, and all the delegates who have joined this particular national webinar and the keynote address. With these few words, once again, I am indebted to all of you. Happy Teachers' Day. Jai Hind. Thank you.